Welcome to the newest episode in an ongoing Legendarium series about the plagues that have struck and shaped humanity. In this installment, the Athenian Plague of 430 BC, we will talk about the beginning of the Peloponnesian War and how Athens' strategy to win the war was crippled by an epidemic of typhoid fever that swept into Europe from Ethiopia. In the year 433 BC, the Peloponnesian War erupted between Sparta and Athens. The two states fought for control of classical Greece. Spartan troops invaded the Athenian countryside and began cutting down the grain and slaughtering the livestock. Thousands of country dwellers fled the Athenian countryside and sought refuge behind Athens' city walls. Many of the refugees from the countryside took refuge in the city's temples. The Athenians hoped they could stay safe behind their walls and remain supplied by the sea because their long walls extended to the port of Piraeus, and from there they could continue to import grain, and the Spartans simply did not have the manpower or siege equipment to take the city of Athens itself. And for a time, it looked as if Athens' strategy would win the war. Yet Athens would be doomed by events hundreds of miles to the south. Scholars have long wondered whether smallpox, typhus, or bubonic plague came into Athens. The most recent research indicates that an epidemic of typhoid fever originated in Ethiopia and swept through Saharan Africa, including the classical breadbaskets of Egypt and Libya. Most likely, Egyptian ships brought the plague into Athens with grain shipments, and from there, the disease contaminated Athens' water supply and spread like wildfire through the overcrowded city. Because they worked with contagious patients, doctors would be the first to die in the Athenian Plague of 430 BC. Thucydides, an Athenian notable who wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War, described the Athenian plague in detail. He described a fever so extreme that patients only became comfortable by taking all of their clothes off and sometimes immersing themselves in cold water. Thucydides also noted that patients suffered from violent convulsions, their breath became unbearably foul, they were constantly thirsty, and grew so restless they could not sleep at night despite exhaustion. The patient suffered symptoms for 7 to 9 days and then died or survived. Those who lived gained immunity against future outbreaks, but at a terrible cost. They often suffered from disfigurement of the fingers, toes, and genitals. In some cases, these body parts simply fell off completely. Thucydides further noted that birds and animals that sometimes fed on human corpses perished after eating diseased human flesh. Thucydides, himself a stern moralist, lamented the breakdown in morals and social norms that occurred during the plague. Some people began to ignore proper funerary rites and simply buried victims in plague pits or went looking around for a funeral pyre and simply hurled a body onto that. Many people, not believing they would live to see another day, began squandering their savings on dissipated living. And the worst of the bunch would simply go into houses emptied by the plague and help themselves to any possessions that the owners had left behind. In the end, 1/3 of Athens' 300,000 citizens perished. It spread through eastern Athens, the north of Greece, and the western coast of Asia Minor, which was dotted with Greek colonies. It finally burned itself out by 426 BC. Yet this disastrous loss of life badly weakened Athens and went a long way towards helping Sparta win the Peloponnesian War and become the dominant power of classical Greece. That wraps things up for this installment of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.